We're back here, whole 9 yards on a Tuesday afternoon. Drew PN here with Brandon Krikorian. We haven't recorded in about a week since technically last week or last Thursday we did the draft live stream. That was on Twitch. For some reason, YouTube was being weird. But I mean, Brandon, what'd you think of our first ever live stream?
Yeah, I mean, it was fun to do, I guess. I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, we had some people out, in the chat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Especially that one kid. But yeah, I mean, it was something fun to do, and it was we did it to the 20th pick in the first round, and it was pretty exciting. First 20 picks, I'd say. So I think it was pretty fun.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm not exactly sure what other events are worthy of live streaming. If anybody thinks of any, I mean, drop them down in the comments of this video. I don't know that, I would say NBA draft probably. I mean, definitely not the first 30 picks, but probably like the lottery, I think, would be like a good live
top
stream.
10, top 12, something like that, yeah.
I mean, the other two drafts, like MLB, NHL, I mean, there's obviously going to be great players. I just don't know that it's, I don't think people really care too much about it just because, I mean, especially the MLB, but I'm trying to think of like other things. If anybody thinks of anything, drop them down in the comments, but I guess we're just going to talk about our two favorite teams, how their drafts went. I'll let Brandon go first. Takeaways on the Cowboys draft.
Yeah, we saw it on the live stream. Obviously, J.C. Horn went 8 to the Panthers. Surtain went 9 to the Broncos, which as soon as Horn was taken, I think I said it, that I'm pretty sure the Broncos are going Surtain here. And they did. Obviously, the Cowboys had the 10th pick. I think everyone had Surtain going to the Cowboys at 10. Obviously, that didn't happen. That's the guy I wanted. We needed a corner. Even if it was Horn, I would have been fine with that. But definitely, I wanted Surtain. But we needed corner. That's obviously our biggest position. We only have one true corner on the outside right now in Trevon Diggs. We have Jordan Lewis playing the slot corner, so we needed another outside guy, which would have been Surtain, even Horn. So the fact that it didn't happen definitely hurt. Obviously, we traded back with Philadelphia 2 spots to 12, and we picked up Micah Parsons, which I said I wasn't mad that we picked him because obviously that was our only choice at that point. After you lose both corners, you're not going to take Farley at 10 or 12 if they because he just wouldn't have been there with the back injury. This is honestly the only play. Maybe offensive lineman again. I don't think you take him at 12. So I think Parsons was the only player to take right here. And again, he's a linebacker, which isn't a position that we need. Obviously, we have Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith, but he is not really a linebacker. He's more of like a Von Miller kind of pass rusher type guy, and I think that's what I was listening to the press conferences afterwards, and McCarthy and Dan Quinn, our defensive coordinator, kept saying he's going to be playing with his hand in the dirt. He's going to be rushing the quarterback. He can play linebacker, but he's going to be rushing the quarterback mostly. So if he can be an elite pass rusher, I think that's a huge win. I think I said it. He has to be like a top 5 player at his position to be like, all right, this is like a home run pick. Because other than that, because even if Surtain and Horn are just solid, they're not perennial Pro Bowls. As long as they're solid, and Parsons is like, he's good but not great, then it's a bad pick then. So if he can be a top 5 player, then that's a great pick. And he definitely has the talent to do it. I mean, there's a reason he fell is because of the character issues, but without those character issues, he's a top 5 pick, no doubt. So I thought that was a good pick for the circumstance that we were put in. And then obviously, we went defense. I think 5 or 6 of our picks were defense. We went Kelvin Joseph 2nd round. I don't know how much I love that pick because Asante Samuel Jr. was still on the board at that point. Obviously, we were going to go corner there after missing first-round corner. So Kelvin Joseph, I mean, he was LSU, transferred to Kentucky. He's a playmaker. He's only 5'11", though. I know Asante Samuel Jr. is also pretty small, but I feel like there was more upside with Asante Samuel Jr. So I would have liked to seen him be picked there. I don't know how good Kelvin Joseph is going to be, especially with that height concern. I just think playing outside, you need to have some height, and if you're going to be 5'11", you have to be a true playmaker and have you have to be picking balls off left and right, which means you're probably gambling a lot, which is what Trevon Diggs does. So I think we have 2 of the same corners, honestly, playing on the outside. So I don't know how much I love that. And then we got some edge rushers next couple picks, which, I mean, you can always use edge rushers. I think our philosophy for this draft is going with guys with long arms. For some reason, Dan Quinn loves guys with long arms that could push and have length and get under tackles. So I guess that's what they went with, and Chauncey Golston and Osa Idigazua. I don't know how to say his last name, but he's from UCLA. I thought those are decent picks, nothing great. And then we took Deshaun Wright out of Oregon State, another corner. Again, he seemed like a little bit of a reach. It seemed like this draft, you were honestly reaching for a lot of picks. To be fair, I think we could have taken guys later in the draft that we took, or just taken guys who were properly ranked for that spot in the draft, which we passed up on to take guys over them. So I don't know how much I felt about that, but I thought our next pick, I think this was probably the steal of the draft for us, was Drabil Cox, the linebacker out of LSU. He slipped a lot, and I thought he was a great pick of where we took him. And again, he's a linebacker again, but I think he's going to be a really good player. If he at least has the chance to play for us. Obviously, we have a lot of linebacker people at that position, and Jalen, Leighton, Micah, even Keanu Neal, who he signed in the offseason. So it's going to be tough for him to play, but I think if he does, he's going to be a good player. So I thought that was probably our best pick of the draft. But again, we went defense mostly. We took a couple offensive guys, a couple backup tackles and offensive linemen. I think we took a backup wide receiver also. But we went defense heavy, which is what we needed. I just don't know. I don't know how many of these guys are going to be true playmakers for our team. That's the only issue. I think Parsons is. I think Cox, if he could play, will. And then Joseph, I think maybe. I just think the height's a big concern with him. I think if he was taller, I'd really like the pick. But being 5'11", I don't know how much I love that pick. So I guess if I were to give a grade for our draft, I'd probably give it a B or B-, honestly. I don't know how much I loved the draft, like I've been saying. But if Parsons turns out to be a top 5 player, then I think it's a great draft, because anytime you get a guy like that in your draft, no matter what the other picks are, I think it's a great draft. So I guess it's dependent on Parsons, but for right now, I'll go B, B-.
That's fair. I mean, yeah, I don't know too much about, past Parsons, the Cowboys draft, but I think Asante Samuel would have been a guy that if I'm the Cowboys, I look at, maybe it's just the name, and it doesn't really mean anything at all, but especially after you look at Antoine Winfield last year and see him do what he did, it's just if he's doing that, and obviously, Antoine Winfield Sr. was, a solid guy in the NFL for many years, played on the Vikings.
Yeah.
Asante Samuel should be something like that. Derwin James pushed for the Chargers to take Asante Samuel. Again, I'm not sure what that really means, but, I mean, he's a clear, Derwin James, a clear top 4 safety in the league when he's healthy. So, yeah, the Patriots draft, I'll just start from the top and go to the bottom. Mac Jones, you heard me at the stream if you watched it. I wasn't a huge fan. Looking back on it, I'm starting to like it slightly more than I did earlier, but only really slightly. I was looking, and you really, to get Fields, he wouldn't even have probably had to give up a first. I think he would have just had to move down from a second round pick to a 4th round pick, I think is what somebody was saying. I'd have to look at the math again. I'll probably tweet about it, but and Twitter's in the description. So yeah, you wouldn't have, at most, all you would have had to do is give up next year's first. And if that's your guy, clearly it wasn't. They would have had Fields on this team today if they wanted Fields. And if Fields had slid down to 15, it's an interesting conversation. Let's just say, hypothetically, Fields and Jones were both at 15. I mean, they take Jones. They take Jones. That's the guy they wanted. And I don't think Belichick was happy to make that pick. I think, the whole front office and everybody was like, Belichick, we need a quarterback here. We need Mac. And he was like, all right, I guess. I think Belichick was pushing to get Garoppolo. That's what a bunch of local people are saying that, I listen to and definitely trust. He wanted Garoppolo, and if he had it his way, he has Garoppolo on the Patriots today, and he doesn't have Jones on the Patriots, and they use that pick for something else probably. Now, with that being said, I still think Jones can be at his ceiling a slightly more athletic Matt Ryan, which is a guy who can win an MVP. Matt Ryan won an MVP, but it's going to take some good circumstances, and you're probably going to need, Kyle Shanahan. Can Josh McDaniels be that for a year? Sure, maybe we'll see, but, I think Fields has the higher upside, and even if he doesn't work out in Chicago, I'm still going to say, unless he's completely trash, I mean, I still think the Patriots system is, much more helpful to a guy like Fields than Chicago, just because the best quarterback Chicago's ever had is like Jay Cutler. So it's tough. The second round pick, they traded up 8 spots. They gave up 2 fourth-rounders to get there, to move up 8 spots, which is a decent amount. And they picked Christian Barmore. He's a defensive tackle out of Alabama. I'm not sure if I love the pick scheme-wise. It doesn't really make too much sense. They're kind of moving into a 3-4, and I don't know exactly where you'd slot him. He'll find time to play. They signed a couple defensive tackle free agents this offseason. Devon Godchaux and Henry Anderson, if you know who they are. They brought back Captain Lawrence Guy, so he's gonna have he's gonna compete for sure to find playing time, but he'll find it. I mean, you don't just move up 8 spots and not play a guy. They clearly had him as probably a low first round grade. If this was one of those years where they're in the playoffs and competing for conference championships and Super Bowls, this is the guy they probably take in the first round. Maybe not. I'd assume it would have been. Third round pick, they took a defensive end, Ronnie Perkins out of Oklahoma. He was another guy that kind of slid. Christian Barmore also kind of slid, and I think you could say Jones. I don't know that he kind of slipped, but just before the draft, there was clearly at least a chance he was going to go 3. I mean, I think most people said Trey Lance. I said Jones. I was clearly wrong, but I think there was a chance he went 3. There's still a chance he would have gone 8 or 9 or 7. So, yeah, they took 3 guys that kind of slid a little bit, at least in the first 3 rounds. Perkins, I'm not too familiar with him, but he'll join, Matt Judon, who they signed, Dietrich Wise, they re-signed, Winovich, a third-round pick from a couple years ago. He's going to get playing time as long as he's not horrible. And he needs to be good, because I don't love the Patriots pass rush at all. And I think, if he's actually good, he'll definitely find playing time. 4th round pick, they picked Randry Stevenson. We'll see. He kind of seems like I didn't do too much research on the running back, so I'm not too familiar with him. But looking at highlights and looking at analysis, he's basically just kind of like a LeGarrette Blount power back, and we didn't really have that, so it's nice to have. 4th round pick's not too much to spend on it. I want him to be. I still, if he's not good, and by good I mean if he's not like a top 35, 40 running back in the NFL, I don't know that I'd like it as a pick. We have running backs. I don't, we could, they're a dime a dozen. I don't want this guy to bust, even if though it's a 4th round pick, not that much. I'll spend less time on these ones, but they got a linebacker at 177 overall, Cameron McGrone out of Michigan. They've taken a few Michigan guys the past couple of years, Winovich, who I talked about, Uche they took last year. McGrone's coming off a torn ACL in November. We'll see. Hopefully he joins that linebacker core. They're aging. Dante Hightower's a guy that you could have potentially seen retire this year. He opted out the year before this for COVID reasons. And then, you get your 6th round picks, safety out of Missouri. We'll see. They got the veteran Adrian Phillips, Kyle Duggar, who they drafted last year. We'll see. I don't expect him to do much. Maybe he will. 6th round pick, 197, offensive lineman out of Colorado. He should just be kind of a, he's probably going to be a fill-in guy for the short term, long term. Maybe he fills in as a tackle here and there. Who knows? And their last pick was Trey Nixon, a wide receiver. We'll see. I mean, I don't expect much. But he was recruited by Alabama, so I'm sure maybe Nick Saban had some words about him. I don't know. It's a 7th round pick. So,
yeah. And the one thing I will say, the Ronnie Perkins pick, I thought that was a good pick because I wanted the Cowboys to take him. He was available when we took Osa. I thought we should have went Ronnie Perkins. It seemed like you're right. I mean, he did slip, and it did seem like he was graded to be, like a 2nd round guy, and I think he was 3rd round. So it was when the Cowboys pick was up there and I saw Perkins, and I kind of knew we were going to go defensive end after going corner, and then obviously Parsons linebacker, and there was really no safeties on the board at that point. I thought Perkins was the guy, and they didn't go with him, so I don't exactly know what the reason was because of that. I mean, I don't know what his arm length is, and maybe that played a reason into why they didn't draft him. I don't know what his arm length is, but I just thought that was going to be a good pick there, and we passed up on him, and then the Patriots took him. So I thought that was a good pick by the Patriots. I thought it was a miss by the Cowboys, though.
If I were to give the Patriots draft a grade, I would probably lean B+, maybe B, maybe A-. I'd say probably a B+. It's going to depend on Mac Jones. I mean, that's basically where the draft starts and not where it ends, but that's clearly, that's the pick that you need to hit. I would probably give it a B- or a B, but if it was just Jones's pick, just because, it fills a need, but I don't know if I love the guy, but I don't hate him either. Barmore, I think, is a good pick. Perkins, I think, is a good pick. Stevenson is not a bad one. McGrone, I think, is a solid high ceiling, low floor pick, and I don't care about the 6 or 7s. We'll see. The reason I don't want to give it an A or an A plus is because they didn't draft a receiver, and now I will say that might be good because the Patriots just don't know how to draft receivers. I mean, the last successful receiver they drafted, it was Edelman, and he was a quarterback in college. So I don't want to say, I just, so there's no potential to get a good wide receiver out of this draft. But at the same time, if they just know they can't draft receivers, then I can't blame them for basically just only taking one in the 7th round.
Yeah, I like the Patriots draft also. I thought not trading up for Jones or Fields, I think getting your guy without having to trade up, I thought that made it a good draft already. Obviously, you have to see how he plays, but just based off what they did in the draft, I thought that was a good step. Obviously, your first pick. And then, I thought the Perkins pick was a good pick. And then, getting a guy like Barrymore in the 2nd round when he could have been a first-round talent, but, getting him, I think that was a pretty good pick too. So, I'd probably agree with B+, somewhere around there.
I will say I don't know how much Belichick really likes drafting Jones. I think he likes Jones, but I just think, he thinks we could get a guy like Jones in the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th. I think he thinks that. I think he thinks that that Jones is probably more similar to a guy like Kyle Trask than he is a guy like, Fields, Wilson, Lance, Lawrence. Those guys have just, clear first-round talent. I don't know that Jones has that, and I think Belichick knows that. Even if Jones turns out to be great or good, I think Belichick thinks that. So I don't know. I don't know that Belichick loves it. I think, like I said, he would have rather had Garoppolo on that roster. But I guess we'll get into other teams we thought had a good offseason. We'll also be talking about Rodgers as well. I guess the first team that I'd probably look at would be the Chiefs. They brought in a bunch of offensive linemen. I think Joe Thuney's the most notable name. They also brought Kyle Long out of retirement. They drafted some guys as well. Their biggest glaring need, everybody saw it in the whole U.S. last year, or this year technically, was that, you're not protecting Mahomes. You need to protect Mahomes. Addressing that is obviously huge. There's not much to be said other than that. That's a clear need. Other than that, your roster is basically there. You could probably use maybe a piece in the secondary. You could probably, maybe use a linebacker. But, you're there. You were in the Super Bowl, and, that game's at least more competitive if you have a solid offensive line. So you have to look there first. So I'd look there, and I think they had a good offseason, good draft. Who knows if Thuney actually works out, but I think theoretically that's a good pick or a good signing.
Yeah, a team that I wanted to look at was this kind of had to do more with the draft, I would say, than free agency. But I thought with the Vikings, I thought they had a really good draft. They traded down for Christian Darrisaw, which I think they were most likely going to take at 14 anyways. I think if Slater did fall to them at 14, they were going to take him. But obviously he went 13 to the Chargers. The Jets moved up to 14 from 23 to take Elijah Vera Tucker. If the Vikings were going to take, an offensive lineman there, if they were going to take Tucker then they obviously would have just taken him there. So I think they liked Darrisaw more, which obviously made them more inclined to trade down. They got 2 third-round picks for that. So they ended up, I think, with 4 third-round picks on draft day. And I just thought that was a really good trade by them to do that. And they did take Kellen Mond. He's a project quarterback, I'd say. Obviously you have Kirk Cousins. People were thinking maybe they take Jones at 14. Maybe they try to get Fields if they really wanted to in the draft, because obviously Kirk Cousins isn't going to be their long-term answer. So I think getting a guy like Kellen Mond, look, we'll see. We'll see if he can actually be a starting quarterback in the NFL. He might just be, he's probably destined to just be a backup. But again, it's not a bad pick. I think it's someone that could turn out to be at least someone in the NFL. And again, it's not like the Vikings are really going to do much this year, I don't really think. So I think it's a good pick to have him. But they had a lot of draft picks this year. I think they had 11 picks in the draft this year, and I just think they got a lot of depth, a lot of rotational guys, the guys that can turn into starters and can turn into big players possibly. Again, they're not a team that's going to do anything this year, probably not next year, probably not even the year after that, unless Kellen Mond or they get a quarterback that's a really good guy. But I think just getting these guys to be depth guys and guys that can turn into starters and having them progress over the next year or two, I think is big, and especially with this many draft picks. And again, in a division where, again, we'll talk about the Rodgers situation, but the Packers may not be the top of that division that much longer. The Lions are still at the bottom, still have their answer at quarterback. Obviously, the Bears got Fields, but we'll see, how long it takes him to become, a star quarterback if he ever even does. So I think this division for the next couple of years is going to be open unless Fields turns into a top 7 quarterback in the next 2 years. So I just thought they had a really good draft, and obviously offseason wise they didn't do much, but I just thought they had a really good draft.
I'm gonna look at the Packers, and I'm not gonna call them out for having a good draft, but I will say I like the direction of not catering to Rodgers. And I guess I'm kind of talking about Rodgers now, and it's hard for me to talk about the Packers without talking about Rodgers. I don't like the pick of Stokes. I don't know that I think I like Myers. I don't know too much about Amari Rodgers out of Clemson. 4th, 5th, I'm not too familiar with, but I think Stokes was clearly a reach. I think there are other cornerbacks on the board that you probably would have rather had. If Stokes is their guy, though, all right, sure. It's not a horrible reach. So, sure, I'm not gonna. But all I'm gonna say is, we saw how Favre and Rodgers worked out. It was clearly the right move not to, cater to Favre and let him come back out of retirement and kick Rodgers to the curb on that. Rodgers was your guy, and I don't know that Love is your guy, but I'm not going to cater to Rodgers just to get him to stay. And I'm not going to throw my team's future away just for this, especially as the Packers. If you're the Bucks, you have nothing better to do. You're not going to win with Winston. I think that was the play, and they were the worst team in basically all of major sports, or at least top, bottom 10 probably. So yeah, I think that makes more sense. As the Packers, though, you're such a historical organization. You can do better than that. You drafted Love, and I know people are gonna, not like that pick, but I actually didn't hate the Love pick. I don't know if Love's actually the guy, but as far as taking a quarterback, at least, I don't think that's a bad pick. I don't know how much time Rodgers had left. He wants out now. We'll see how it works out. But I wouldn't like the idea of just basically letting Rodgers run GM, and I don't like the attitude. A guy that I listen to talks about, he's a local Pats guy, but he's a Packers fan. He's from Wisconsin, and he has the same opinion. That's kind of where my opinion comes from. I'd say is just I don't love the catering to Rodgers. His attitude's horrible, and I don't know how far you get. And even if you're able to bring Rodgers back with this team right now. Yeah, you're going to compete. You might get to an NFC championship, but to me, I don't. And nobody ever knows what happens from there. If you're in an NFC championship, you have a chance, at least a puncher's chance. But I just don't think they're contenders. Like I think they're kind of. They've lost so many NFC championship games. This was the year for them. Last year was their year to get to the Super Bowl, and they blew the chance. Rodgers finds a way, and I don't think these losses are. Rodgers has blame in these losses. He definitely has blame in the Packers loss, and it's not all his fault, but still. And I like the Packers not bending to Aaron Rodgers, will and kissing the ring.
Yeah, I'm gonna save what I have to say for Rodgers probably for right after this. I'll when we officially talk about it, but yeah, I definitely agree with some of those points and definitely disagree with some of them, but again, we have more to talk about that right after. But for my next team, I'm actually going with a team that I didn't like their offseason and didn't really like their draft. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers. I guess I'll start with free agency because it was obviously before the draft. So I guess notable signings that they did or notable unsignings that they did was, so they re-signed Juju Smith-Schuster it was basically a 1-year deal that only had a cap hit of $2.4 million, really. So it wasn't, for a guy like Juju, yeah, he fits the Pittsburgh culture, I guess. I don't know how good of a player he actually is. Obviously he's not a number one like we now know. He's probably a slot guy, probably a number 2, unless your number 1's like a top, 7 guy, wide receiver in the league. So I guess it's not a bad re-signing, obviously, because you still do need him on that team, but they didn't really sign anyone else other than that. Kind of just rotational guys, depth guys. And they let go. I mean, Bud Dupree obviously did tear his ACL, but you did let him go. Mike Hilton, Steven Nelson as your corners. They're not great corners. I think Pittsburgh Steelers fans would know that. Those guys aren't great corners, but they're still pretty decent corners and guys who are starters in the NFL. So just to let them go and not really address that at all, it was kind of a concern. I mean, your top corner right now is Joe Hayden, and Joe Hayden's definitely not bad, but he's definitely on the decline from what he was the last couple of years. And for him to be your number one cornerback, I think it's definitely a tough task for someone like him. And when you look at their draft, I mean, they spent their first round pick on Najee Harris, and obviously running back's been a concern for them since Le'Veon. What was that? 2017, 2018? I guess 2017 was the last year he played for the Steelers. Obviously with James Conner, who people thought could possibly be a top running back, but clearly he wasn't. I think some of the blame's on him, and some of it's also on the offensive line. But they getting a guy like Najee Harris, I think he would be better on a team with a better offensive line. I just don't like their offensive line. I think that's more of the problem than the running back is right now. I don't like, no matter what running back you'd put on the offensive line right now, I don't think he'd be great just because I don't think it's a good offensive line. And like I said, they didn't really address that in free agency. They just Alejandro Villanueva just signed with the Ravens. Obviously, he was on the Steelers' offensive line. They lost Pouncey, who retired. So you lost a couple guys from that offensive line the last 10 years, basically. That's been one of the best offensive lines, but they're getting older. They're retiring. They're leaving. So I think it's a problem. They spent their second pick on the Penn State tight end. I did like that pick. I think this guy is actually going to be a pretty good tight end. It's Pat Freiermuth. I don't really know how to say his last name. But a lot of people can comparing him to Gronk, which, I mean, I don't know if you can ever really do that with someone, but a lot of people have been. So that could possibly be a pretty good tight end. They've always had pretty good tight ends in Pittsburgh. But then other than that, I just didn't really like their picks. I just didn't think they did anything that was substantial. They still didn't really address the cornerback issue. I think the only corner they took was Oklahoma cornerback Trey Norwood, and I think that was in like the 7th round or something like that. So they didn't really address that. Their second corner right now, I guess, is him, or I guess on their depth chart right now they have Justin Lane, who I don't even really know who that is. So I think they have problems on their defense. Obviously, their defense has been one of their bigger probably their strongest part the last couple of years, but I think their defense has definitely declined, and their offense, I don't know it's gotten that much better. So I didn't really like their offseason. I didn't really like their draft. And in a division that's probably going to be a pretty tough division, I don't really like their chances for the playoffs, honestly.
I don't love the Steelers draft either. I didn't love that either. Yeah, I don't know that they address needs. And if you asked me, and this I'm segueing here into my next team that I think this actually is a draft I didn't like as well, but not addressing value. Like, I think Alex Leatherwood's a bad value pick. That's such a big reach there at 17. If you ask me, out of all the 32 players in the first round, which two I don't like the most, I would look at the two running backs, and I don't love Najee Harris. I think he's a guy that, to me, he's a third or fourth. He's like a second or third round talent running back. He's a guy that he'll get the job done if there's an offensive line for him, and he'll make some plays. But he's not an elite, generational type running back. He's not a Saquon, obviously, and he wasn't taken where Saquon was. But to me, if I'm taking a running back in the first round, I need him to be a guaranteed top 10 at his position at least guaranteed top 10. If you're doing the Saquon draft over again, Saquon doesn't go 2. I don't even know if he goes top 10.
Definitely not 2.
Clearly not 2. So and he was probably the most highly hyped running back prospect, I guess, since probably Ezekiel Elliott, maybe even before that. So I hate running back picks there, because they're probably not going to be top 10 at the position, him or Etienne. And that makes me look at the Jaguars draft. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is a home run. I'm not going to give him credit for it, though, because, you just got gifted the first round pick because the Jets are dumb, and when they win, they lose. So yeah, I'm not going to give you credit for it, but obviously, you have him now. Etienne, I don't like it. I would have rather you drafted wide receiver. If you're looking for an offensive weapon, draft me a wide receiver. You could have, even if you wanted to draft an offensive lineman there that you liked, sure. And anything other than a running back. I don't know that I love Etienne. You have Robinson, and you definitely don't need to, just because you have him doesn't mean you can't draft Etienne or a running back, but, get him in the 3rd or 4th round. You don't have to draft a running back in the 1st round. I hate that pick. It's so bad. Their other drafts, though, I mean, I don't love who they drafted other than that. And if you look at their free agency signings too, I don't love them either. I mean, you signed Shaquille Griffin at cornerback. I don't know that I love it. You have Carlos Hyde, who, to me would have been, we'll see. He's not too much of an investment, but I don't know why you're signing Hyde when you're drafting Etienne in the 1st round. I mean, you're going to have Robinson and Etienne. Now you don't need Hyde at all. He's not like a receiving back that you would want. He's not a specialty back really. Marvin Jones Jr., is this your solution for wide receiver? Bringing in Marvin Jones, and that's basically it. I mean, I don't love it. I don't love it at all. So it's scary. Tyson Campbell, I didn't mind that pick. We'll see. They drafted Walker Little, also offensive tackle from Stanford. We'll see. But they didn't really. What is Lawrence really going to have with him? He's gonna have Robinson. He's gonna have Etienne. Chark. I don't know that he's a 1 though. I don't think he is.
I don't think so either.
I think he's probably maybe a mediocre 2. I don't know. I don't think you've set up Lawrence great for passing success. You'll probably have a running game. I don't know how good the offensive line is going to be. I'm not going to tell you that the offensive line is going to be good. It definitely won't be awful. We'll see how good the draft pickups are. We'll see how good Walker Little is. I'm not sure that he starts day 1. I just don't like their draft. I don't, excluding Trevor Lawrence, because if you counted that, then sure, it's a good draft. But, I mean, that was the obvious pick.
Yeah, and I agree totally with that ETN pick. There's no reason to take him in the 1st round. I mean, you already have Robinson. If you want to take another running back, take him 3rd, 4th round. It's not as big of an investment. It's not a 1st round pick you're wasting a guy on. And they're wasting ETN. But, I mean, I definitely like the 2 running back system. I mean, mostly every single team does have at least 2 running backs, if not 3. So I definitely don't mind that. But get him in the 3rd round. Get him in the 4th round when it's not as big. You're not spending so much on a guy who isn't even going to be the full-time starter. He's going to be splitting carries. You easily could have gotten just anyone else at that point in the draft. It was just a weird pick. I didn't really like it.
Etienne and Robinson essentially has to be just as good, if not better, than Chubb and Hunt in my mind. It has to be that type of combination for me to be like, all right, that wasn't a bad pick. If it's anything short of that, I don't like it at all.
I really. I mean, who knows? Maybe Lawrence said something. They said he didn't. I mean, it kind of would be hard for him, for that not to be true. But I just didn't really like that pick. You could have gotten him in the 2nd round if you wanted to, which it's still I don't agree with. But at least it's not a 1st round pick. But I guess for my last team, and this doesn't even have to do with the draft. This is total offseason, total free agency. It's the Bucs, the defending Super Bowl champs. They brought every single person back that they needed to bring back. All 22 starters are back. Obviously, Godwin, Gronk, AB, Levante David, Shaquille Barrett, Leonard Fournette, Ndamukong Suh. They brought it back everyone. So that's an A+ right there. Just to bring back everyone from the Super Bowl team. You extended Brady, which, I think was pretty obvious, obviously. But you didn't lose anyone, like I was saying. They lost, 2 kind of rotational guys. The draft, look, you're not going to have a great draft most likely anyways, but I guess just to read off a little bit of what they had, they took Joe Tryon.
He's a guy that should be able to fill in with pass rushing needs. He'd probably get a little bit of play and, specific pass rushing downs this year. But he'll look to probably replace JPP after this year. That's my guess. Yeah.
I think a lot of these guys that they drafted are probably not going to play a lot this first year, but obviously when these guys are older or waiting on contracts, do leave at some point in the next coming years, these guys will fill in for them. They did take Kyle Trask, which, we'll see how that turns out. Obviously, he's not going to start, anytime soon, but obviously when Brady's done, if he does show some potential in training camp, obviously working under Brady and studying under him definitely doesn't hurt. We saw the last time that happened with Garoppolo. I would say it worked out. Garoppolo, he's not a great quarterback. I think injuries have definitely hurt him in that. But he's definitely not the worst quarterback either. So if Trask can somewhat become a guy in the next 2, 3, 4 years, whenever Brady does decide to retire, he can definitely become the starter of the Bucs. We'll see how good he is, though. I mean, he was really good last year, but we'll have to see how that translates to the NFL. But again, this isn't much about the draft. It's more about free agency, bringing back all those guys, running it back at least for this year. I think is just huge. And obviously, when you have Brady as your quarterback, you always have a chance. So yeah, I thought the Bucs had a home run in free agency, and then the draft is kind of just a bonus.
I love the Bucs free agency. I'm not sure that the draft, to me, Tryon's fine. I think you need to address the other parts of the defensive line. I would have liked to pick up maybe a guy to replace Sue after this year, because I think he's probably gone after this year. Would be my assumption. You could have drafted an outside linebacker. To me, the secondary is still scary. I'm not sure that I'm in love with the secondary. I mean, obviously you have Davis, you have
Sean Murphy Bunting.
You have who's the other guy? I don't know why I'm blanking, but I just oh my god, I don't know why I'm
corner.
Yeah,
safety?
corner.
Bunting. I'll look it up while you talk.
My mind's blanking, but Winfield's fine. Whitehead's okay. To me, if you use pick 32, if you liked a cornerback there, I would have taken a cornerback because I'm not sure that it wouldn't surprise me, and they're all young, the secondary, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Carlton Davis fall off or
Cockrell, Dean, Ryan Smith. I don't think he's even on the team anymore. Jamel Dean. Yeah.
Yeah. I just to me, it would have. I don't know that I love Dean. I don't know that I love Davis. They're good players, and they clearly had a good year this year, but I think that's a position that I look at and I say it could be a problem this year, and to me, I would have liked to address it. Trask is a fine pick. If a quarterback had to get Heisman, he probably gets it, and he would have. It would have been a really underwhelming Heisman, but
it probably would have been Jones, but Trask probably would have been second. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah. But obviously off-season, I think it's fine. If it was any other team other than the Bucs, I don't know that I'd love it. I just think a lot of those contracts aren't great. I don't even know that I love the Barrett contract. I don't know that I love some of these contracts. But you're the Bucs. I mean, you're not looking to be a team. You're not like the Packers. You're not the Steelers. You're not the Patriots. You're not the Cowboys. So.
Yeah. So unless you have another team, I think that was probably it then. Right?
Yeah.
So we'll get into Rodgers officially now. Obviously, Drew talked about it before, but. Hours before the first round of the NFL draft, I guess he didn't say it, but obviously he leaked it, or at least someone from his camp leaked it, that he doesn't want to be on the Packers anymore. He wants to be traded. He's not going to come back. There's reports that, he wants the GM fired. He's not going to come back unless he's fired. The wide receiver, Kumaro, I think is his last name. When he got released, that pissed Rodgers off even more because he just praised him the day before or something like that. There's a million things that are going on. Obviously, the Jordan Love pick, they didn't involve Rodgers in on it, which obviously when you have a star quarterback like that who's been your quarterback for a decade plus, you're not going to involve him in on that when not only did you draft a quarterback in the first round, but you traded up to draft a quarterback in the first round, which was crazy. And obviously not letting him in on that I just don't understand how a front office does do that. Even no matter what you think of Rodgers, he could be annoying, and he definitely is. I definitely don't love his attitude, but if I'm a GM, that's the first guy I'm asking. What do you think about this? And obviously he's going to say no, but at least you have to ask him, right? So there's definitely a lot of things on both sides that have been wrong. Rodgers has done stuff wrong. I think the front office and the ownership has done a lot of stuff wrong, but it seems like he wants to be traded. It's going to be hard to see if he does not get traded. And I think there was something that after June 1st, his cap hit for this year, I think was $20 million, and then the year after it's $18 million. If you trade him after June 1st, if you trade him before June 1st, I think it's $27 million. So there's definitely incentive to trade him after June 1st if you're the Packers, if it does come to that point. But yeah, it's definitely a wild situation. I guess, do you think Aaron Rodgers will be traded? And if you do, where do you think he'll be traded?
I don't know. I honestly don't know where he would get traded, and I know that's a cop-out answer, but I really don't. The Niners would have been a team they offered. It seems like they offered a huge ransom for Rodgers. Would have been probably basically what they got to get to 3 and then 3 as well. or well, what they used to get to 3 or 3, and then probably Garoppolo and maybe players. So you would have gotten a lot. I think that's probably the team that you would have looked to trade to, just because if you're trading Rodgers, you're not looking to contend, and if he contends for a couple of years with the Niners, I think that's fine. Now, without that being in play, I think Denver is a possibility. I think he probably goes AFC. I don't see a team in the NFC that I would love to trade him to. You're not going to trade him in division, obviously. I don't know that even if any of those teams weren't in the division, you'd trade him to them anyways. But you look in the AFC, I think Denver's a possibility. But other than that, I don't know that there's like a perfect fit for Rodgers. And my only thing is just like, if you were going to trade Rodgers, there were so many more options before free agency, before the draft, before the Matt Stafford trade. You should have been on top of this. You should have known. And to me, that just signals that the communication between Rodgers and the Packers has just been horrible. To me, I would never, let the quarterback kind of decide what I do if I'm in the front office. But the communication still needs to be there. If I'm taking Love, I want to make it known. I want to make sure that I'm not ruining relationships here. So that clearly wasn't done. Who was the wide receiver they cut again?
Kumaro. I think James Kumaro is his name.
Kumaro. To me, that's not a guy I cut, at least right now, or at least try to soften the blow for Rodgers. The communication's clearly just not been there. The relationship's basically fallen apart. I don't know exactly how, but I think the front office is to blame, and I think Rodgers is to blame way more than people think. I don't know that it's just that's as much or more as the front office, but I think Rodgers gets too much just leeway in this. I think his attitude's been a problem in the NFL. And not in the conventional way, but just a snobby, almost diva type of way, like an Odell Beckham. Not the hothead stuff really, but just he's not a Mahomes, he's not a Brady, and that's what's held him back in my mind. And I don't know that. I think it can be changed, and I think if Rodgers gets traded, I think he probably wins the Super Bowl if it's to a contending team. But yeah, I don't know if he plays. If my gut tells me he'll stay in Green Bay and they find a way to get this done. But I don't know. I think there's definitely a clear chance that it's just ruined and that he has to get traded. And I don't know. I don't think the Packers are going to get as much as they'd like. But if it's that or he sits and they just make him sit, I think they trade him, because every day that passes, his trade value gets worse and worse. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of outcomes for this, or possible outcomes. I think the Broncos definitely are the favorite right now. And I was kind of looking up trades. It's mostly just draft picks that would be traded. Obviously, you're not really going to have to trade a quarterback if you're going to trade for Rodgers, because they have Jordan Love. So you'd assume that you're not getting a quarterback in return. So you'd probably get just players. Maybe you get like a wide receiver or something, whatever it had to be, whatever team. But you're going to get a lot of first-round picks. That's really going to be the trade. If it's the Broncos, I think the Broncos team, other than their quarterback, obviously, in Drew Lock, I think their team as a whole is a pretty good team. And obviously, they're in a tough division. Obviously, you have the Chiefs. The Raiders are whatever. They're not going to be anything really. The Chargers, definitely on the come-up. I guess they're probably not up there yet, but they will be in the next couple of years. So it's definitely a tough division. But if you put Rodgers on that team, they're making the playoffs. I don't know if they win the division, but it's still like, in the NFC, you have to deal with Brady, and if you go to the AFC, you have to deal with Mahomes. So, which one do you want to deal with? Obviously, Brady's not going to be there for longer, so that may be a little more of an incentive. But I also look at it as, if you stay on the Packers, you can say what you want about the Packers, but they made the NFC Championship 2 years in a row. They went 13-3 both years. If you stay, I feel like that's your best chance to win, is to be in the NFC. You really only have to get by Brady. I guess the Rams with Stafford, obviously that's definitely a tough team. Seattle, they're always, by the time they get to the playoffs, they always.
I think the NFC playoffs are really competitive. I think there's a lot of good teams, and I think with the AFC, it's a little bit more top heavy than the NFC. And to me, I'd rather be in the AFC. There's
still that top team in the Chiefs that you're gonna have to face.
Yeah, but you're gonna have to face them regardless.
Yeah, I would say yes. There's definitely more of a possibility of them not facing them in the Super Bowl than there is of them, if he was in the AFC, than facing them in the AFC playoffs. But I feel like if you're the Packers' problem is their defense. It's not so much so their offense. It's more so their defense when they get to the playoffs. There's so many stats, but his Rodgers' playoff games in his career, his defense has given up 30 plus points however many times, 25 plus points how many times. That's why they always draft defense. And one of his big problems with the Packers is that they never draft offensive skilled players. I mean, in the first round. So, I mean, you've had Jordy Nelson, you've had Randall Cobb, you have Devontae Adams, you have MVS, you have Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. I mean, you have, what's the tight end? Robert Tonyan. You have a great offensive line. It's like, what else do you really need offensively? There's a reason they draft defensively almost every first round and in most of their drafts, because their defense just isn't great. Now, I don't know how good they are at drafting defense, because clearly it's not working out. But I just see, like, he has so many problems with that. Like, I don't know, does he want it to be his own team? Does he want to have way more say in an organization? Does he, like, I just don't know what he wants, honestly.
I think Rodgers and Wilson, those two quarterbacks, have been a little bit upset at least. And I think they looked at Brady winning the Super Bowl and they were just like, all right, I need something closer to that. And to me, I don't think that's the move as an organization. I don't think it's the move. I think Brady is a very, very unique exception. Obviously, 6-time before the Bucs, 6-time Super Bowl champion, probably the greatest quarterback of all time, and at least in 90% of people's minds. It's a very unique exception. He was, 42 years old at the time of the signing or whatever. He came in knowing that he would have a huge play and a role in the team. That's such a unique exception, and I don't know that I would, let that occur for any other quarterback in the league. So I just think it's a kind of toxic, and I think Arians was able to handle it well. I think he realized after a little bit, at least, that, it's as much as he's the head coach, Brady's kind of also the head coach, and he's also the GM, and he is also the quarterback, and that's kind of, what he signed on for. So and I don't know that I'm doing that for Rodgers. I really don't. If I'm the Packers, I don't. I continue to do what I need to do. And I think drafting defense is kind of the play, and I'm not saying always draft defense. Draft who you have highly ranked, but I'm not catering to Rodgers. I'm not.
Yeah, and Brady's situation, it was a desperate team that was looking for anything. And obviously the Packers aren't a desperate team. And the Broncos, I guess the Broncos somewhat could be a desperate team. I mean, obviously the Broncos trade for Rodgers. He's going to have a say in that organization. That's going to be a reason why they are trading for him. But it's something that I don't even know if he'll be traded. Also, I guess another team possibly could be Washington. That's a team that definitely fits. A team that needs a quarterback, has a pretty good defense, has weapons at least, and McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, who they signed. They have Antonio Gibson in the backfield. So it definitely could make sense. Again, I don't know if they trade him in conference. It's just usually what you don't do when you're trading a guy like that, if you ever have to trade a guy like that. So that's another team possibly. But if he is going to get traded, I would probably say the Broncos. It makes the most sense, at least for both teams, or at least for the Broncos-wise. And yeah, it's something where I think he should stay with the Packers, but I feel like that relationship is almost completely destroyed.
I'm not sure. And as far as the Broncos are concerned, I think it makes a lot of sense, but at the same time, I'm not sure what you have to give up. You're gonna have to give up a lot.
You're going to give up at least like 3 first-round picks.
The Broncos are basically just coming out of being like a horrible team. I mean, now they're kind of not horrible, but they're still not great, but they're rebuilding clearly. Do you want to commit to another Peyton Manning era? And I don't think that the roster is as good as when it was when Peyton Manning came in. I don't, you had Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, Julius Thomas, Sean Moreno, who was
Emmanuel
no slouch.
Sanders.
Emmanuel Sanders came in there eventually. The defense was loaded in 2015, especially Chris Harris, Aqib Talib, Von Miller. You still have Von Miller, but Von Miller's a guy that could have easily been cut.
Yeah.
He's not going to get cut. Bradley Chubb we don't know really. I mean, he kind of just hasn't done much in the NFL.
I think Bradley Chubb's pretty good.
No, he's pretty good, but him and Von Miller aren't an elite pass rushing duo.
No, definitely not. Definitely
not elite. They have the potential to be elite, maybe, if you get really lucky. I don't love the defense nearly as much as I did in 2015. I don't love the offense nearly as much as I did in 2013. I'm not expecting it to be like that. And, I'm not expecting you to combine both of those teams. But I don't think this team is nearly as good. You don't have DeMarcus Ware either, who you would bring in free agency. I don't think this is a thing where you go all in. If you're able to get Rodgers, I'd like to get Rodgers, be able to be a high-level team. But I'm not throwing everything in. I'm not throwing everything in the basket and hoping and then committing to another, basically 4 or 5 year period where you're just gonna, be 4-12, 5-11. And I don't like Fangio either. I would fire Fangio.
Yeah,
but they're not now. But
the only question for the Broncos is, when is another guy like this going to be available? Obviously, you always have the draft, but it's, you're gonna have to get lucky at some point in the draft. You're gonna have to get lucky, whether it's gonna be a top pick and you get a guy, or he falls down in the middle of the first round or whatever, or you just find a guy in the fourth round. But for a team like the Broncos, it seems like they're somewhat desperate in that Elway has always been looking for a quarterback. Obviously, he'd rather have a rookie quarterback who's going to be like a Mahomes, Watson type guy than a 37, 38-year-old in Rodgers. But I feel like it's something that is worth it for them. Like you said, they're going to have probably 3 or 4 years where they're going to be really good if they have Rodgers. Because, again, I think their team is good. Obviously, they have Surtain. Fuller's on a 1-year contract. You could maybe re-sign him. Probably not, but maybe. You have Justin Simmons, who's one of the best safeties in the league. You have Chubb. And you could always add to that defense in the draft, free agency. Then you have Rodgers. You have Sutton. You have Jerry Jeudy. You have Noah Fant. Melvin Gordon, your running back. That's kind of whatever. Your offensive line's not terrible. I just think this is their best shot in order to get back to being a competitive team. And even if it's for 3 or 4 years, I think it may be worth it if you know the next 4 or 5 years are going to be pretty bad. Obviously, a Super Bowl does make it worth it, and that's obviously the hope when you bring in a guy like Rodgers with this team. But I do think it's worth it if they were to trade for him, because this time next year I don't think he's going to be there. Even if he's not traded, I still don't think by the time next year I don't think he's going to be there. So
you need one Super Bowl. I mean, obviously,
well, yeah,
at least one,
yeah.
And then you're gonna give up probably the next 3 years of first round picks and more than that, because the next 3 years with Rodgers are gonna be at least 20 plus.
Yeah.
It's a lot to give up. I probably do it. If you told me right now, if you're the Broncos, do you do it or not knowing the compensation, but clearly assuming it's gonna be a lot, I probably do it. If you're the Packers, I probably do it as well. And that's not the popular answer, definitely not. But I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look at the specifics of the deal, but I think that's a deal that is probably most probable. I don't know that they're as good as the 2013 Broncos when he got there, or 2012 when he got there, but we'll see. We'll see how that works out. I'm excited for it. It's it adds to just an insane offseason. So
yeah. So I guess that's it. Unless we have anything else, but that was kind of really all. I mean, we've been leading up to the draft for the last month. It happened. It was definitely very exciting. I mean, you had the first round, really the first 20 picks, I guess I would say, were really interesting. A lot of good picks, a lot of trades, a lot of things were going on, which I think most of us thought was going to happen. So yeah, I thought it was a good draft. I thought. I guess it's technically the end of the 2020-2021 NFL season, I guess technically. But yeah, we're going to, I guess football is going to be off the table for a little while, but by the time the summer starts wrapping up and then the fall starts coming, football is going to be coming back, unless a Watson gets traded or Rodgers gets traded, something like that. So yeah, I think it was a pretty good football, year, I would say, especially for, what we're dealing with in the world. So yeah, I thought it was really good, and I thought the draft, like I said, was a pretty good draft.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more NFL, but we'll probably look to get into MLB, NBA. It's been a while. It's definitely been a while.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike Trout's batting over 400, and clearly, I mean, he's got like 80 at bats this year. But NBA, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, LeBron's comments, I think, are huge. To me, I'm very scared now as a guy who I don't know about wants, but probably would pick the Lakers, would have at least picked the Lakers earlier to win the finals and did. It's scary. I mean, basically, he basically said, I'm probably never going to be 100% of my career again.
Yeah.
And he's a drama queen.
He is.
I don't know that I completely buy it, but he might not be, he'll probably never be prime 2013 LeBron, and he hasn't been for a little bit.
Yeah, no. I mean, he's definitely not going to be 2013 LeBron. That, I mean, I think it was 2013 the MVP, or maybe it was 2012. Like, that was his best season probably of his career ever. And probably one of the best seasons of all time if you really look at it. But, I mean, obviously he's not going to be that player. He's, 35 or whatever he is? So
36.
He's 36. I mean, of course he's not going to be the guy that he was when he was 28. But, will he ever be 100% again in his career? I think he probably will. I mean, but will he ever be like that? No, definitely not. But, it is, time is coming down on LeBron. I think he only has 2 or 3 years left of being a true elite player. And we'll see what happens. I've never witnessed like a true great player like that, his career come to an end. Obviously Kobe, but I think the injury had more to do with that than anything else. In that, the Achilles and everything like that. LeBron obviously just hasn't had that yet. I mean, the ankle sprain, an ankle sprain was his biggest injury of his career, if you think about it. So it's something that's going to be, in the next couple of years, it's going to be something to look at. And I guess we'll see how it plays out. But definitely for the finals this year, the Lakers, they may even face the Clippers in the first round, which I think could be a tough matchup for them. I think that's definitely a tough matchup if Kawhi and PG are healthy. I think that's a tough matchup for them. Obviously, AD and LeBron have to be healthy too, but it's going to be a tough West. I think the Jazz I don't like the Jazz that much. I like the Suns. I think the Suns would struggle with the Lakers if the Lakers are healthy because I think their size just completely dominates the Suns. But if the Suns don't have to face the Lakers, at least until the Western Conference Finals, that's going to be a really tough series. Even though I just said I like the Lakers, I think it's still going to be a really tough series. I think the Suns are definitely sneaking up on a lot of people. And yeah, it's going to be a really good West. And the way the Nuggets have been playing without Jamal Murray, I mean, I thought they'd struggled. I think they're 11-2 or something like that since he's gotten injured, 10-2 or whatever it is. So we'll see how it comes to when the playoffs start and teams start locking in. But yeah, it's going to be a really good playoffs, especially in the West.
If you had to pick right now, Western Conference Championship series and winner.
I guess depending on what the seeds are right now, or just
who are your two best teams in the Western Conference, and who would win that if they were to match up in the Western Conference Finals?
Assuming everyone's healthy, I would say I want to say Suns Lakers. Or possibly the Clippers are thrown in there. I just don't know which team the Clippers would replace, but I think Suns Lakers. I think that would be the Western Conference Final.
If you're telling me everybody's healthy, I'm Clippers Lakers. If you're telling me you're gambling, I'm gambling the Lakers. I think I still go Lakers Clippers. I take that risk. I still think those are the two best teams. I think Suns are there. I think the Clippers are going to go to the finals. I think they're my team right now.
I think if the Clippers are healthy, they definitely have a chance, as long as they don't see the Lakers until the Western Conference Finals. If they see them before that, I think it's going to be tough for them. But the Suns, I think the Suns have a really good shot. I think it's just their size is going to kill them. If they face the Lakers, even the Nuggets could honestly give them trouble just because of their size and stuff. So
the easy answer is probably whoever gets the most favorable road. Whoever doesn't have to play either the Lakers and Clippers or Lakers and Suns or Suns and Clippers. Whoever only has to play one of those truly elite teams. If you can get by playing a Blazers or a Warriors in the first round, then somehow find way to play, the Nuggets in the second round. I mean, that's a pretty favorable matchup rather than, if you had to play the Lakers in the first round and then play the I don't know, maybe the Clippers and then maybe play the Jazz or the Suns. I mean, that's a hard road. I mean, I don't know if that happens. The Lakers would have to fall pretty far down, but they're only one game out of being in the play-in. Maybe 2, 1.5. The Lakers are 37-28, and the Trailblazers are 36-29, and they're in the play-in right now.
Someone behind you.
Really?
Yeah. I'm trying to get your attention.
Really?
Turn around.
Yeah, do you need it? Yeah, I mean, obviously. Ruining the podcast, dude. What's going on?
I know. I don't want to say anything, but he kept he was there for maybe 3 minutes.
3 minutes, just sitting there,
he was there, and I was is he trying to get our attention? And then he's like, yeah. He kept pointing at you. I thought he was trying to tell us that we were out of time or something. I don't know what he was trying to say.
Anyways, all right. But yeah, I mean that's basically it. I will say by accident, instead of hitting cut, I hit this auto button, and it does a weird transition. I mean, not that it matters, but I figured I'd point that out. So I kind of just pressed a couple buttons, see what they did, but there's this weird animation that looks horrible. I'm kind of scared to press other buttons, but I'm going to do it anyways. I don't think it really does much, but
I guess right before we wrap up, our next episode, which I'm going to assume is going to be on Thursday. I mean, obviously, just for us, school is ending. I think you said you're leaving today, right?
No,
Or-
I probably won't leave today. I probably
All
won't.
right. Well, I guess the next
But-
couple days. I mean, I'm probably leaving Thursday. I would assume you're probably leaving the next 2 days or something like that. So, I'm going to assume we'll have one Thursday. Maybe it'll be Friday, or maybe at some point later in the week. But it's going to be an NBA. I'm going to say right now it's going to be an NBA episode. At least I want to talk about the NBA. Obviously, there's like 10 games left, 8 games left in the NBA season right before the playoffs start, and there's a lot of interesting cases. We just talked about the West, but in the East, in the play-in tournament, even the West, the play-in tournament, the Lakers could possibly be in it. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about in the race to the playoffs, and then obviously when the playoffs start, we'll do a full breakdown of that. So the next 2 weeks are going to be a lot of NBA and a lot of MLB too.
Yep. Sounds good. Enjoy the weird new transitions that I found. But everything in the description. Feel free, check it out. We'll be back Thursday, Friday, probably Thursday, maybe Friday. So
Yeah.
yeah.